Hello guys and welcome to a new Steel Division 2 video. This tournament is the Steel Division Throwback tournament. The rules were that you can only use the Back to War DLC divisions, and then the final will be played on Steel Division Normandy 44. I'm going to be joined by Primus Pilus for this cast. Make sure to go check out his and my own Twitch channels linked in the description. In this video we are going to be covering the game between Angry Bird and Nilla, also known as Hitman, in round 2 upper bracket of the tournament. Hello guys and welcome to a new Steel Division 2 video today. I'm joined once again by Primus Pilus.
Hey.
Today we are going to be casting another game from the Throwback tournament. We have Angry Bird versus Nilla on Orsha East. Angry Bird on the Soviet side is going to be using the 3rd Armoured, and on the Axis side, Nilla is using the 352nd Infantry. What do you think about this matchup, Primus?
So this is a very interesting matchup. Nilla has chosen a very infantry-focused division, the 352nd. I think it's also known as the Pegasus division. Very curious to see how an infantry division will stack up in such a competitive environment, because from my experience I've seen in both the Throwback tournament and in other tournaments and in competitive games, usually mechanized and armored divisions are more prominent in terms of a competitive playstyle. But it'll be interesting to see how Nilla is going to use the rather mass infantry advantage that the 352nd has over the 3rd Armored Division. And curiously, it'll be interesting to see how Angry Bird is going to utilize the balanced income that they've chosen this time around. It's not a very common sight to see in competitive games, balanced income. What do you think on that regard?
Yeah, the income's interesting for sure. The balanced income is fine for the 3rd because I think it's a very strong division in general. So I don't think they're necessarily going to suffer. It's like the same reason you can get away with playing like Juggernaut with the 5th Panzer, because generally they have enough like good stuff in Phase A, and you mustn't forget that you do get the massive points at the start, you know, the 500 odd points. But what's interesting on the side of the 352nd, he's gone for Maverick, which is not something we see much at the moment. It seems like a relatively weak deployment type at the moment, but yeah, he's going for it.
Yeah, and also curious to note is Nilla, with their deployment, have decided to go full on with the infantry. Usually in deployments, even in infantry divisions, you'd see maybe some armor here and there, or like a tank destroyer or some kind of light vehicle. Nilla went all out on the infantry. Whereas Angry Bird clearly has gone with some Stuarts, which is your standard armored setup, I think, with the 3rd Armored Division, plus a Sherman in the center there, going for that central hill. So it'll be really interesting to see how a full-on infantry start with some anti-tank gun support is going to stack up to heavy armor support.
Yeah, it's going to be very reliant on, it looks like Panzerschreck kills. Like in general, I was a bit worried about the armor disparity for sure between the 3rd Armored and the 352nd, because if there isn't any like significant armor coming out from Nilla like early on, then it's really going to give him a hard time if like the M5A1 and M4A1s manage to find some advantage, you know. And also already like the M8's putting pressure into the middle onto that infantry. The Volksdeutsche, they are disheartened, so they're going to get pinned down quite quickly. They take the extra 50% suppression. So the armoured rifle is going to be coming straight into that firefight and hopefully going to take advantage of that already pinned infantry.
Yes, indeed. What do you think of the map? Which division do you think benefits from this map, which is Orsha East, by the way? As you can tell, it's a very sort of flashpoint-centric map where there's a lot of close-range urban brawling and forest brawling. Which division do you think prefers this kind of terrain?
It works kind of in favour of 352nd, but it also just kind of like slows down the 3rd. It doesn't necessarily take away their ability to work, because using M4s is always good at close range, right? So it's basically yes, it gives Nilla a chance to slow the game down, but the M4s are going to be like the killing blow really in this setup. And in regards to this middle engagement, the AT gun did get destroyed immediately by the M8. It took the 50 cal fire and the 30 cal fire, plus the HE shell to the face, and it was just gone in seconds. However, the armoured rifles are losing out now to the infantry, and the strafing run coming in there is pretty important. It's actually going to take out the Greyhound.
Very nice use of the airplanes here. I gotta say that Nilla is one of those players that uses aircraft, probably the most aggressive use of aircraft I've seen from almost any player in any tournament. So really good stuff there, supporting the infantry push there. That Greyhound loss was obviously pretty big. However, there is a Sherman in the center there to back up that Greyhound. And as we know, Shermans have machine guns upon machine guns with machine guns on them. That'll provide a lot of short-range suppressive fire on any advancing German infantry. Now, aside from that, I do think that Nilla's advance, though, has gotten a bit of a breakthrough because of the loss of that Greyhound. I don't think it's like a blitzkrieg or a heavy breakthrough, and I think where Nilla is actually going to aim to maybe consolidate some gains is actually the southern section where they have a massive infantry advantage. However, Nilla hasn't been really aggressive there. What do you think Nilla is going to do? Do you think Nilla is going to focus more or less on the center, or do you think they're going to focus in the south, in that small patch of woods, and claim that victory objective there?
I think it's difficult for him to push the center just because of all of the armor, like the M4A1s and M5A1s, like putting all their machine guns on target any time like an infantry squad shows its face is not the best place to be. However, on the top and bottom side, where it's very concentrated with these trees, you can definitely make some ground. He already took out some heavy flamethrowers previously with the pioneers and stuff with that initial engagement. So Angry Bird relying on those has not really worked out too much so far. Those two-man flamethrower squads definitely don't have as much value as they used to, and so once again that one going down on the bottom side before it even fires its flamethrower. It's quite often now, quite common, sorry.
Yeah, so we have a quite intense engagement in the south here. Bring attention to. It's basically engineers and heavy flamethrowers exchanging heavy anti-tank with also some half-track support from the 3rd Armored Division. I think this is going to be a key engagement because if Angry Bird is quite successful here, they'll be able to surrender a rather large, or defeat a rather large portion of Nilla's forces. Alternatively, if Nilla comes out on top of this engagement, they could basically completely rout Angry Bird's southern flank here, and I'm wondering how it's going to pan out here. The Stuart's in a good position, but it's getting pinned down by that Flammenwerfer. The Panzerschreck is unfortunately out of position, is moving towards one of those half-tracks. It seems relatively balanced, but I gotta give it to Nilla here. I think they have the overall advantage just because of the concentration of infantry, and we have a very successful strafe coming in, taking out one of the half-tracks. I think Nilla has got the southern flank relatively well secured here.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried for a second, but the pioneers in the middle managed to stay out of harm's way for long enough, and that prevented the other units from surrendering. Also, obviously, the battery Fjorda is still full health, so that helps for sure. But in the centre, whilst that was all going on, the infantry that was protecting the flag on Nilla's side did get taken out, so the half-track's now rushing through as that's Thruppen all in there. Opal Blitz going to be thrown into the fire, just charging it down. If they unload next to it, they can potentially just throw grenades inside, but the Pak 38 is going to get the job done anyway. Then the M5A1s, M4A1s, this is what you don't want to see. All of these Opal Blitz is just going to get ripped to pieces, although that strafing run is going to cause the M5A1 to surrender, so another nice use of the ME109 by Nilla.
Yes, indeed. What do you think is a how do you think Nilla can use infantry aggressively? Because I was always thinking that with armored divisions, being aggressive is pretty self-explanatory. You know, you have the armor, it's mobile, it can shoot on the move, especially Shermans. They're armored, so they don't take as much damage. But how effective do you think an infantry division can be in an aggressive strategy?
It really depends how willing you are to throw the infantry in like this. Because they can take a lot of ground, and if you spread infantry out enough, they can be like a real nuisance, right? Because you have to deal with them in all sorts of different areas. Whereas like with tanks and armor, you generally normally see them near roads. But really important kill there. The Pak-38 managed to ambush the M4, and that's because the ersatz kind of made it back up towards those trees where the Pak-38 was. AA does finally come in and takes care of one of those aircraft, so that's no longer going to be an issue for Angry Bird. Good to see him finally take care of that, because those strafing runs were affecting his Stuarts quite badly, where the Stuarts have a little bit lighter armor than the Shermans. But yeah, the bottom side is fully under control of Hitman now. He's taking control of the two flags in the center for the time being with the ersatz. And it looks like, to me, that the infantry availability in the early game against the 3rd Armoured is certainly falling in favour of Hitman because of that. So the game in general is doing really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. I think maybe Angry Bird has been engaging in a bit too much of an infantry duel here, and hasn't really been using the mobility of their own armor. But maybe that's Angry Bird's strategy, is that they're delaying here as much as possible, because they're going to get their income advantage in Phase B into Phase C. However, I think how much Nilla has been focusing on infantry, and with some lucky kills on some of Angry Bird's early Shermans there, with that really well placed Pak-38 ambush, and taking out that Greyhound with the strafe here. I think it's basically at this point Nilla's going to start painting the map in blue with tons of infantry, both Volksdeutsche and Ersatztruppen, without even needing armor support, surprisingly.
Yeah, so the amount of infantry just makes it so difficult to push. Like it just bogs down the other player, because you've got to generally put infantry first before your tanks, otherwise you're very likely to get yourself ambushed. So the fact is that there's a lot of infantry to chew through here, with the 3rd Armoured's lack of infantry. So the tanks are not going to be as effective because you don't have enough infantry to make it happen. And it seems like Angry Bird's bringing all of his infantry that I've seen so far, or a lot of it, in half tracks, and that's very expensive. So again, that sort of reduces the amount that he's going to be bringing in, not necessarily the availability, but yeah, the amount that he's going to have access to at any one point. And well, these two armoured rifles, they're about to get surrounded, and that's going to be pushing a 17th point towards Nilla, and it'll be 17-7, which would be pretty significant.
So what do you think Angry Bird could have done to stop the blue wave of Ersatztruppen that Nilla has employed here, as we get further into the match and transitioning into the Phase B? What resources do you think Angry Bird has?
So I was surprised that we didn't see like a jumbo. I was surprised that we didn't see more M4s at the start, rather than the Stuarts. I'm really not a fan of the Stuarts at the moment. I don't think they're that effective at all. You saw how they got strafed easily. With the M4, that strafing run probably wouldn't have fully pinned it, so it would have been able to, survive the first strafing run, and then, unless you just left it where it was, it would have been fine. But yeah, the M501s, they don't have that luxury. They're just going to get pinned down straight away, and that definitely cost him in a lot of these engagements. Just one fighter basically winning them. And then I would say the other thing is maybe too many half tracks in Phase A basically meant that he didn't have the infantry control he needed to kind of prevent Hitman from taking all this ground. And once again, another fighter coming in with strafing run onto the armoured rifles in the mid. I'm going to be helping to pin those down. There's only 5 men left there, well, 6 in total if you count both the squads and the Volksdeutsche, and they've already pinned them down, so it's not long until that comes fully under control.
Yeah, we have a big unit coming up for Nilla up in the north here. We see our first Jagdpanther coming in to basically take control of that northern open ground where we see some Stuarts and Shermans dueling against some infantry there. That Jagdpanther is basically going to own that entire open ground. Unless Angry Bird can get, as you said, maybe jumbos at this point, I think that Jagdpanther will be king in the north, basically in that area. I gotta agree with you that Very, very interesting that Angry Bird hasn't really deployed any sort of key third armored division units in the early game. Again, maybe because they've approached it with a balanced style and they're leaving all the jumbos for later. My biggest surprise is that we haven't seen any heavier artillery from Angry Bird. Sort of looking at how Herr Robert used artillery in one of their matches was quite effective at delaying not only armor but also infantry, and the power, for example, of the priests is that they have a powerful enough blast that they can pin down some assaults better than say mortars, because mortars are actually a little bit too accurate in this case. They can't affect as many infantry units. Do you think artillery would have helped here, or maybe it was also still too expensive, just like the half tracks?
M7s for sure would have definitely been a good idea because that's one way you can punish Nilla's use or overuse, in my opinion, of the disheartened troops. Because I'm not a massive fan of disheartened troops because they automatically run away when they get pinned down, and so you can exploit that if you just keep hitting them with artillery. They'll just keep running away and just keep like relinquishing ground towards you. So that's one way you can really exploit things. Now we're in Phase B, it's a different story because Nilla's now bringing in the Sigurungs. He's got the Grenadiers, so they're kind of able to hold the line much easier. Jagdpanther obviously on the field on the top side is about to pop that poor M5A1. Yep, one shot for that.
Yep, down it goes.
And from this position, it's like, I already mentioned how it's incredibly difficult because of the infantry disparity for Angry Bird to push back, and he's kind of stuck in this grind where he needs to have infantry to push on to Nilla's infantry to reveal it, and then use the M4s to get the pinning done with the main gun and the machine guns. But it's just not really cost effective right now because of the, well, first of all, the fact he's bringing them in like everything in half tracks, or not everything. He did have a card in Phase B without half tracks, but yeah, he just got stuck in that grind between having to use tanks and infantry when he was already behind, especially in infantry. And well, eventually Angry Bird's going to relinquish the game after 14 minutes and 7 seconds. Hitman is victorious.
Taking a look at the team stats here, we can also see that I think Nilla chose a lot of really good trades. The kill death ratio between Nilla and Angry Bird is basically about 2 to 1. So that just shows that how Nilla microed their units, and the units that they did bring in to counter the third armored division have just been placed at the right time and used correctly.
Yeah, indeed. And if we jump over to like the kills tab, there's really nothing significant here. It's just armored rifles trying to trade with infantry. The 50 cal did manage to take out one of the Pack 38s. We see the mortar carrier taking out a Pack 40, and the Bofors eventually killing the ME-109 G6. But in this situation, the main kills you want to see is, like, for example, this M4A1 that managed to get 3 infantry kills, but you want that to be like 6 infantry kills or 7 infantry kills, and for every M4A1 you have. And there's only one, and that's like for the first like 10 minutes of the game. Whereas if we go over to the losses, the Grenadiers there scoring 4-1 with those Grenadiers. The ME-109 G6 is like M8 and M3A1 half track, just getting rid of that support. It's the trouble is that you need something substantial, and you can see that everything that didn't have much armor died very quickly. So M3A1s go down, the M5A1s, like the M4 did get killed by a Pack 38 as well, but that was more due to I think Angry Bird's just lack of map awareness, because he did see the Pack 38 kill a unit previously, so unless he wasn't looking at that part of the map, of course. But either way, that M4 wouldn't have died, and then that would have been the only M4 that actually died in the game. So you can see that like everything that was cheap, like the Stuarts and the half tracks, they're all dead. The M4, only one of them lost due to basically a micro mistake. So relying on those M5s and M8s, I think, cost him the game, especially like early on, and lost him a lot of ground because it didn't have anything substantial to sit there and kind of just be a nuisance for all of those disheartened troops.
Do you think this comes from a unit choice or maybe an income choice for Angry Birds deck, or both?
I'm not sure income was necessarily a problem. because you do still have like 1,500 points to work with. You do lose out on 500 points for not having Vanguard, but if you get to like phase B, it's not too bad. You're actually at a less of a disparity versus Maverick than you were in phase A, but yeah, it's all about just unit choice, I think, in my opinion. Just like the way in which he built the battle group, relying on like units. In certain cases, like M5A1s can be okay, but not in the open. And the trouble is with like a 352nd, they're going to focus on Panzerschrecks in the close quarters. So you kind of have to have something that can be out in the open without having to worry about it being hit. So that's where M4s come in handy. And it's just sort of like that deeper knowledge of like the matchup, I guess, that probably didn't really come across whilst he was making the battle group. I mean, we saw it in the game between Herr Robert and I can't remember who it was. Was it Duro? I think it was Duro.
Yes.
Yeah. Duro with his 21st Panzer, I don't think built towards the matchup. And that's like a mistake a lot of players make at the moment. I think it's very important to adjust your battle groups before you go in. And in this case, I think that maybe Angry Bird didn't really think about it, but it definitely made a difference in this one.
I see.
So yeah, is that about it? Anything else to say?
I think so. I think we covered a lot of the main strengths and weaknesses and issues that both Angry Bird and Nilla show in this match.
Awesome. Well, that's about it then. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. Thank you once again, Primus, for joining me for this commentary.
Thank you for inviting me, and hope to do more of these in the future.
Thanks a lot, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.
Take care.